Picture him, sitting in a room that costs more to run per hour than most people earn in a month, surrounded by engineers from Stanford, MIT, Cambridge, and the question the boardroom never said out loud, but absolutely thought. Why is he here? Because the story the West told itself was simple. Filipino workers? Cheap labor. A budget option. A backup plan. That was the story. And if this is your first time on this channel, we don't do simple stories here. We do the real ones. The ones they don't put in the headline. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. Now back to him. While the boardrooms were busy underestimating him, two of the most powerful organizations on the planet were quietly reaching a completely different conclusion. NASA and Google. They weren't hiring Filipino professionals because they were affordable. They were hiring them because they discovered something the West's greatest universities never taught. An invisible cognitive asset. Something forged not in a classroom, but across 500 years of fire. Google's content moderation AI, one of the most sophisticated systems ever built, begins to collapse. Not because of English, not because of Mandarin or Spanish. It collapses because of taglish, the fluid, real-time code switching between Tagalog and English that over 100 million Filipinos use every single day. A sentence like, "Grabe naman," that's literally what I said no, parang ong oamo, to a Filipino, instantly readable. Casual, funny, warm. To Google's AI, trained on clean, structured, monolingual data, a complete nightmare. Is it a threat? Is it sarcasm? Is it harmless? The algorithm has no idea, because it was built by people who had never needed to think in two languages simultaneously, who stepped in and fixed it. Filipino linguistic specialists. People who didn't need a briefing document, because Taglish was the language they spoke at breakfast. That capacity, holding two complete cultural systems in the mind at once and navigating between them without effort. That was just the first piece. Now, picture him in a different room. Smaller, tighter, the air heavier. A NASA mission operations center. Something has gone wrong, and something extraordinary is happening to the people around him. The Ivy League engineers, brilliant, decorated, are freezing. Not physically, cognitively. There is a documented psychological phenomenon called the ego crash. It happens to hyper-specialized, high-status individuals under catastrophic, unscripted pressure. Their entire identity is built on being right, on having the answer. So when a crisis hits that falls outside their model, they lock up. They don't speak up because half-formed means wrong, and wrong means damaged status. That silence isn't stupidity. It's ego protecting itself. And in mission-critical environments, that silence kills missions. While the room freezes, he moves. Why? Here is the twist. The West spent 3 centuries building the greatest knowledge system in human history. Elite universities, hyper-specialized disciplines, meritocratic ladders built on individual achievement. The whole system was engineered to produce one thing, the singular genius. The lone expert who rises above all others. And for a long time, that model dominated the world. But it had a fatal flaw. It only works when the problem fits the model. The moment a crisis arrives that is chaotic, multi-layered, and genuinely outside every framework, the system eats itself. Because the singular genius was never trained to say, "I don't know, let's figure it out together." He was trained to know. And when he doesn't, he crashes. Now, go back. Way back. Before the Spanish arrived in 1565, the Philippine archipelago was already one of the most complex trade intersection points in the ancient world. Traders from southern China, the Majapahit Empire, Arab merchants following monsoon routes, all converging on these islands. The people here didn't have the luxury of one language, one power, one system. They had to run all of them simultaneously just to survive. Then came 333 years of Spanish colonial rule, followed by nearly 50 years of American governance, a completely different legal framework, a different educational system, imposed on top of everything already there. And through all of it, the Filipino people didn't collapse. They adapted, not just culturally, cognitively, behaviorally. They developed the ability to hold multiple frameworks in the mind simultaneously, to switch between them fluidly, to read a room in 3 languages and respond in the one that works. That is not a soft skill. That is a survival technology. And if you're still watching, you already know this story is bigger than you expected. If you haven't subscribed yet, now is a good time. Because where this goes from here, you want to see it. And then there is Bayanihan. Most people know it as a beautiful tradition. Neighbors lifting a bamboo home on their shoulders to carry it to a new location together. That's true, but it's also a pre-installed crisis protocol. Think about what the act actually requires. No foreman, no project manager, no hierarchy deciding who lifts which corner. The community assesses the problem together. Roles emerge based on capacity. People take on weight based on what is needed, not based on title or status. Organizational psychologists studying high-performance teams call this distributed leadership under pressure, rapid organic role assignment, high mutual trust, and critically, ego subordination. The individual's need for recognition is voluntarily deprioritized in service of the mission. This is extraordinarily difficult to train into teams from high individualism cultures. But in a population where the cultural default has been collective survival for 5 centuries, it emerges automatically. Because it isn't a skill, it is the culture. When the anomaly appears on the screen and the room fills with the silence of the ego crash, the Filipino professional doesn't experience that silence. Because his entire operating system was built around a different question. Not, what does this mean for me? But what does this need from us? Mission above ego. People above status. Movement above silence. Every time, the Philippines graduates 100,000 engineers every single year. Filipino seafarers operate approximately 1/3 of the entire global commercial fleet as captains, chief officers, chief engineers, steering vessels worth hundreds of millions through the most dangerous waters on Earth. Over 800,000 Filipino registered nurses work across more than 50 countries, forming the structural backbone of critical care units in the UK, the US, Saudi Arabia, and beyond. The Philippine government recorded over $36 billion in remittances in a single recent year. These numbers are not an accident. They are the statistical signature of a people systematically forced to become excellent under conditions that would have broken a less resilient culture. But the data never tells you the cost. It doesn't tell you about the father who hasn't touched his children's faces in 2 years, because the money he sends home is the only thing keeping the family's house. It doesn't tell you about the nurse who holds a stranger's hand through their final moments in a hospital in Manchester. While her own mother ages in a house, she sends balikbayan boxes to twice a year. It doesn't tell you about the seafarer who missed 3 consecutive birthdays, who watched his youngest take his first steps on a cracked phone screen, on a ship, in the middle of the South China Sea. $36 billion. Every dollar is a piece of that sacrifice. Every wire transfer is a decision someone made to put their family's survival above their own comfort, to choose the mission above themselves. As the culture always taught them to, they were never the discount option. They were always the contingency the global system cannot function without. If you know someone living that sacrifice right now, a nurse, a seafarer, an engineer working far from home, drop their name in the comments. Let them know someone sees them. But there's one more thing we haven't told you. Because the Filipino voice, the way over 100 million people speak English, became so globally prevalent in business, aviation, healthcare, and technology, that Oxford University was forced to open a formal debate it had never opened before. Was Philippine English wrong? Or had the definition of correct always been too narrow? What the scholars concluded about the Filipino voice, about what English actually is, and about who gets to own a language, will change the way you hear every English word you've ever spoken. That story, next video. And if this one changed the way you see something, subscribe. Because that's exactly what we do here. Every single time.